As you may know, Syriac originally lacked a vocalization, which was introduced only later. The manuscript itself is written in an unvocalized Strangelo script with vocalization and some lectionary indications added by later hands. And this is also a characteristic feature of many gospel manuscripts. So our manuscript is without vocalization. So this was the original text. But then later on, much probably in the 12th century, these monks which used the manuscript as a lectionary added also some vocals on specific words. And I believe this is a valuable argument to consider that vocalization provides evidence of the manuscript's cultural journey, tracing its path from its origin to its later use. And at some point, the manuscript was actively employed, this is very clear, in the liturgical practices of Syriac Orthodox readers.
Hello and welcome to It Means What It Means, the podcast in which a guy with some college and a day job has long-form conversations about biblical texts. Today's guest is Catalin-Stefan Popa. I will say, bear with me. I remember when I first started bringing up to people I wanted to start a podcast, and I would explain to them what I wanted it to be about, probably with more words than people wanted for a quick, simple question like that. And not every time, but many times I got a response. Ooh, I love theology. And I would have to say, I wouldn't have to, but I would feel compelled to say, that's not really what I mean. This episode is very much in keeping with the kinds of things that I want to be able to talk to academics about with regard to biblical texts. And I bring that up because I am looking to broaden the parameters of what I'm going to talk about. Since I set about the larger project of traditions, I wanted to look at how everyone who engages with biblical texts, no matter how everyone else who engages with biblical texts perceives their engagement, I wanted to talk to everybody. And now I'm looking at a pivot or a shift or a change or a transition to talking about more things. And maybe religion will overlap, but insofar as the beauty to me of this podcast has been the ability to learn about languages, history, different cultures, different political ideologies, different approaches and traditions and readings and means of engagement with texts as we know them right now, and the way that we transform them and are transformed by them collectively, individually, as groups, or watching other groups. That's all still very important to me. But I really want to bring to light that there is so much work happening and that people benefit from that work. And there are people sitting in archives, and sometimes they find things that everyone thought was lost, that it's on the registry or listed in a catalog, but no one's been able to put their hands on it. And then someone like Catalin-Stefan Popa comes along and finds it. And no one knows what the value of that manuscript will be until they learn it. And this can be said of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This can be said of the Cairo Geniza. That is exciting. And I want to spend my free time highlighting the work of people who are doing these things. And I'd like to say painstakingly sifting through, but I think they are joyfully and with gratitude and enthusiasm sorting through all of these documents. I appreciate their love. I appreciate their dedication. So whether it's Nick Posgay or the entire team of people he works with, or the people who worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls, or today's guest, Catalin-Stefan Popa. So that's my setup for this conversation, is bear with me. This may not be the kind of thing you think you're interested in, but I think we do owe a debt of gratitude to people like him who are doing a lot of work, and that Whether you read the Bible for your spiritual growth or for your personal edification or for your personal education, look to see what people like him are saying. As always, for guest suggestions, feedback, or just polite conversation, reach out to me at itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. All one word, itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you want to chip in $5 a month. I'm trying to find the best way I can to incentivize people becoming Patreon supporters. And the ones that I can think of right now are full video episodes are released there, as well as the audio, and they come out 10 days earlier. Here's my conversation with Catalin-Stefan Popa. Take care. Catalin-Stefan Popa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for your interest in my research.
Oh, it is. This is one of those that I'm like, oh, I don't know how many I'm going to get to do like this, because it's an interesting topic. But before we get going with the conversation, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a professor. I'm a research professor at the Romanian Academy in Bucharest. In 2016, I got my PhD from the University of Göttingen in Germany, and then in 2021, I got the habilitation, so the professorial, with a professorial thesis at the University of Graz in Austria. Since then, I am working in Bucharest at the Romanian Academy of Sciences and at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization in Bucharest. So I'm a researcher in the history of religions. I published some books. The last one had a focus on Jerusalem. So the making of Syriac Jerusalem, representation of the Holy City in Syriac literature of late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. And right now I'm working on another project, namely I am preparing a monograph on Stephen the Martyr, the proto-martyr, and his reception in the Syriac literature. So working with a lot of manuscripts.
Thank you for that. Today we will be discussing your Journal of Biblical Literature article, an early Harclaean version in a Syriac Gospel fragmentary manuscript, and then in parentheses, MS or 403. So did I mispronounce anything in there?
No, that's right. It's
okay.
Orientalist Manuscript Oriental 403.
So this article is about manuscripts. So can you just walk us through what these different manuscripts are and what is their significance?
Mm-hmm. So my study, my paper focuses on a biblical Syriac manuscript dating back to the end of the 7th century. I started with this research in 2019 while examining the Oriental Manuscripts collection at the Library of the Romanian Academy in Bucharest. I came across a manuscript that had not been included in the catalog records from the 1970s, though it was briefly mentioned in an internal register. So this manuscript is of great significance to scholars studying the history of the Syriac Bible. Its folios appear to belong to an early Harclaean version of the Gospel. The Gospels. This is a translation and edition of the New Testament completed by Thomas of Harkel, who was a Syriac bishop and scholar in 616. So at the beginning of the 7th century. My discovery led me to not only publish an edition and in-depth analysis of the manuscript, but also to investigate its history, which is it's very interesting. And so I traced its journey to Romania, where it arrived in the late 19th century, brought by diplomats with an interest in historical texts. So this is the story, or let's say the mapping the story of the manuscript in Bucharest. And additionally, I identified another fragment of this same manuscript currently housed in the State Historical Museum in Moscow in Russia. With the help of a colleague from the National Library of Russia in St. Petersburg, I was able to access the first folio of the manuscript, and I'm deeply indebted to this person. I will not reveal the name of this person now. So the paper delves into the manuscript's cultural and stylistic characterization, exploring its literary roots and historical context. I started with the story of the fragments housed in Moscow under the designation Museum Collection 3683. This was formerly Archaeological Society Manuscript 1. I will tell you some more about the story of this Archaeological Society and how actually the manuscript arrived and entered into the possession of the society. And to make the large story, the large picture of the paper, actually I started with some studies, and Nikolai Nikolsky was the first to document that, so the manuscript in Russia. And he published a report at the Archaeological Society in Moscow in 1897, in which he told that a prince, A. Gagarin, donated several sheets of parchment containing Syriac manuscripts to the Moscow Archaeological Society. So this guy, this scholar Nikolsky, published this report on this donation, and this is actually what we know about entering into the possession of the Archaeological Society in Moscow. So this was the first information we possessed about the Syriac manuscript in Russia. So I collected all these pieces of information, and I was able to reconstruct the story in relation with the manuscript, with the sister manuscript in Bucharest. And so the story is a fascinating one, because like the folios that reached Moscow, the Bucharest manuscript does not have a precisely documented circulation history, and this is the point. And examining the historical development of the Oriental Manuscripts collection at the Romanian Academy, actually I constructed a plausible hypothesis how the manuscript came to Bucharest, and the other one, the sister manuscript in Moscow. I think it's really important to also to name some important dates regarding the arrival of the manuscripts in Bucharest. And in my reconstruction, according to my reconstruction to this scenario, the manuscript was likely brought to Bucharest by one of the Romanian diplomats in Turkey, most plausibly Dimitrie Alexandru Sturza. He was a boyar who studied at the Mihailiana Academy in Iași, so in Romanian Academia Mihailiana, from Iași, the first modern higher education institution in the Moldavian region, established in 1835. Then he continued his education in law and economic sciences at German universities, including Berlin, Bonn, Göttingen, and Munich, from 1851 to 1856. So upon his return to Romania, he became involved in political and governmental decision-making. From 1868 to 1870, he served as a diplomat in Constantinople, followed by several ministerial roles, and then 4 terms as prime minister. So he was a politician, he was a historian, he was a diplomat. And notably, the Romanian principalities strengthened their relation with Turkey during this period, establishing consular offices in Constantinople and Smyrna in 1880 and in Adana in 1881. So in this frame, actually, we can place the story of the manuscript. It is likely that Sturza, this scholar, this politician and diplomat, an individual passionate about history and the lover of manuscripts and rare books, acquired the Syriac folios paralleling actually the fate of the sister manuscript procured by Prince Gagarin. So the other face of the medal is that named Prince Gagarin also acquired the folios, probably from the same milieu, from Constantinople, from Turkey. Given his deep dedication to the Romanian Academy, so it is unsurprising that Dimitri Alexandru Sturza then donated the manuscript to the Romanian Academy, and this actually coincides with the establishment of the Romanian Academy Society, and at the same time with the library of the Romanian Academy. So the Romanian Academy Society, which then later on in 1879 became the Romanian Academy. And Sturza played a crucial role actually in expanding its manuscript collection, contributing several valuable works. He was an advocate for financial support for the Academy and for the preservation of its historical archive. So this is the large picture of the manuscripts. We are talking about two pieces of the mother manuscript. One of them arrived Bucharest in 1871, much probably, and the other one arriving Moscow at the end of the 19th century. So this is the large framework of the story.
Okay, so I guess stepping back a little bit more too, because I'm realizing just the first thing off the bat, there's Syriac manuscripts. So for sure for my benefit, but also probably for the listeners, what is Syriac as a language, and how significant is it geographically? Because it seems like a very important part of this story.
The Syriac is a Semitic language, is the Aramaic dialect of Edessa from Urfa today in Turkey, pivotal in the Christianization of the East. The Syriac language is strongly related to the Aramaic spoken by Jesus, and this connection bolstered its prestige among Christians of the Middle East. Syriac became the cultural and scholarly language of Aramaic-speaking Christians, facilitating actually the transmission of writings across Mesopotamia and Asia. Until the medieval period, the most geographically expansive Christian churches were not Roman Catholic or Byzantine, but those stretching from modern Turkey and the Middle East to India and China. So for these churches, Syriac was the lingua franca and was the primary language of Christian scholarship and liturgy. Syriac Christians developed actually a large theological heritage with monastic traditions, with literary writings. They produced the earliest surviving Christian biblical traditions and translations. So we are coming now back to our topic, because these Christians put a lot of interest on Bible transmission, and additionally, with the rise of the Islam in the 7th century, Syriac Christians were missionaries towards India and China, as I said, and they became part of a global church. Over centuries, Syriac Christians adapted to new challenges to preserve their identity, and then we scholars are talking about the Syriac Renaissance in the 12th and 13th century, where in a largely milieu dominated by Arabic language, by Islam, they were able to write again in Syriac, and they produced and compiled a lot of manuscripts in their monasteries in order to support their language and identity. So scholars highlight the significance of ancient Syriac manuscripts many predating Greek and Latin Christian texts, and many remained unpublished, untranslated, and underexplored, as this manuscript, for example, which was considered to be lost, and they actually offer a rich literary and theological heritage waiting to be fully studied.
So the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, but are these texts, because you're saying a lot of the oldest biblical manuscripts that exist are Syriac, are they used to, I guess, kind of judge what the best version of the Greek New Testament that we have on hand is? Like, are they evaluated in that way?
Actually, they are not evaluating the way in which, let's say, Christian preserving Greek or Byzantine tradition produced Bible, but they actually try to produce a better text, try to be very fidel to the message of the Bible, and based on this principle of identity, of relation to the early church, they actually adapted the Bible using also a lot of manuscripts from the Greek biblical tradition. And so we are talking about a very early translation of Bible into Syriac, to Syriac. So at the beginning of the fourth century, at the end of the third, beginning of the fourth century, and then in the fifth, sixth centuries, we know about Peshitta, which can be translated as the simple. So it was a Bible they produced, they translated in order to have a clear, very clear and simple message of the New Testament. And then in the 7th century, we are reaching now another stage of translation, of Bible translation into Syriac, and we are talking about this Harklean version. Actually, this Harklean version is attributed to Thomas of Harkel in 616. And he based actually this translation and adaptation of the Bible on a previous one, which was attributed to a bishop Polycarpus. And this was actually he made the job in relation with another bishop, a very important bishop actually. And so we have now a very a Bible produced in a good way, and this was compared with a lot of Greek manuscripts. This version of Thomas of Harkel. So this is actually the context of the Syriac Bible translations, and I think it's they have their contribution actually to what we have now in terms of biblical manuscripts.
So he's making this translation early in the 7th century. Where does that, I guess, how is that situated with regard to other Syriac texts? Is it old? Is it recent? How does it compare?
Actually, there are some differences between Harklean Bible and Peshitta version, but it's not very significant. Let's say difference because they actually used the same text, but what Thomas of Harkel actually made was to compare the text with many other Greek versions, with many other manuscripts, and So he amended the text. Using these manuscripts in order to produce a better version of the Bible, and in order to make an association actually of both tradition, the Greek one and the Syriac one.
So it sounds like what he was doing is, again, in the 7th century, a version of what translators and scholars started to do in the mid 20th century when they discovered a new trove of texts in, say, the Dead Sea Scrolls or something. They had updated, or they could update translations based on older extant copies. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yes, I think, yes, this is the point. And there are a lot of discussions among scholars regarding this specific of the Harklian version of the Bible. And I also discussed some interesting features regarding the Harklian identity of this manuscript. And I will give you some examples. A particularly intriguing and original feature of this manuscript is the presence of the Harklian symbol. So we to discuss of a manuscript and to make it a Harklian one, actually we should identify distinctive markers. So this is the features to recognize the Harklian text. And these are Asterix and Obelix, borrowed from the Alexandrian school. And based on these symbols, actually we can discuss about this connection between Syriac Bible production and the Greek tradition from Alexandria. So one can see from these elements, from these symbols, which were borrowed from the Alexandrian school, that the Syriac translators, the Syriac biblical scholars, use the same items, use the same instruments as the Greek scholars. So some scholars propose that Asterix in Syriac Harklian manuscripts derive from Thomas of Harkel's adaptation of the Greek text of Polycarp. So, but there are also other scholars suggesting that Thomas himself may have introduced these revisional symbols. So we are talking about some symbols, some revisional symbols, which are attributed to Thomas itself, but also there are some scholars which attribute these symbols also to Polycarp. So to the previous translation of the Bible, which actually happened 1 century before Thomas of Harkel. In our manuscript, in Oriental manuscript 403 from the Romanian Academy, one can see this Harklian sign in the marginalia, because it is very clear that the scholar, the translator, produced some marginalia. He amended the text using some versions from the Greek Bible, but he actually made a fusion of the traditional Asterix and Obelus. So the symbol itself differs from both, resembling an Obelus with a dot at both the top and bottom, so forming a shape akin to a lemniscus or a tilde. So it's a very interesting codicological element, which I also discussed in my paper. And in contrast to this manuscript from the Romanian Academy, there are some manuscripts much later from For example, the manuscript kept in Florence, so in Biblioteca Medicea Laurenziana Plutei 140, which lacks both marginalia and critical symbols in the main text. So, but this manuscript from Florence is also a Harkland version of the Bible, Harkland version of the New Testament. So, my argument is that based on this very specific symbol and based on this marginalia, it is very clear that the manuscript kept at the Romanian Academy in Bucharest is much older than the others. So this is a reason to consider that this is a manuscript of getting back to the 7th century. And of course, there are some more arguments that support this dating.
I kind of want to, little things get stuck in my brain. And so you mentioned marginalia several times. How significant are marginalia in Syriac Bibles? And then in, I guess we'll just say biblical texts as they were generating through history. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Some marginalia are very good testimonies that this manuscript or the manuscripts themselves were produced based on comparing many other texts, many other manuscripts. And if we talk about this Harkland version, we can prove that in this version, the scribe also used a variety of manuscripts, and he tried to produce a better version using the manuscripts, selecting different words, different phrases from different manuscripts. And this is one aspect. The other aspect is that marginalia sometimes were produced together with intercolumnar notes. And in this marginalia and these notes before, between the columns, we can see that later hands made some notes, made some interventions actually into the original manuscripts. And in this manuscript at the Romanian Academy, we also can read some later notes. So the manuscript, as I said, is getting back to the late 7th century, but we can also read some notes from later hands from 12th and 13th century. And this actually shows that the manuscript changed its function and was transformed into a lectionary. And monks added a notation to guide its use in liturgical services. So on the marginalia, one can see, as I said, different versions, and the use of different manuscripts in producing the text. And there are some also later notes produced by different individuals. And this happened mostly in lectionaries. So lectionaries were texts used in liturgical service, and they contained different passages from Bible. And in our manuscript at the Romanian Academy, one can read 4 different notes from 12th century. I can give you an example. There is a phrase on Monday of the 3rd week of Lent, and this actually it's a indication how the monks should use the folio, so the passages, how to read these actually at the within the liturgical service. And beyond these notes, later interventions in the manuscript are also evident. And this is also the theme of the topic of vocalization. As you may know, Syriac originally lacked vocalization, which was introduced only later. The manuscript itself is written in an unvocalized Strangelo script with vocalization and some lectionary indications added by later hands. And this is also a characteristic feature of many gospel manuscripts. So our manuscript is without vocalization. So this was the original text. But then later on, much probably in the 12th century, these monks which used the manuscript as a lectionary added also some vocals on specific words. And I believe this is a valuable argument to consider that vocalization provides evidence of the manuscript's cultural journey, tracing its path from its origin to its later use. And at some point, the manuscript was actively employed, this is very clear, in the liturgical practices of Syriac Orthodox readers.
I was not aware that Syriac doesn't have vocalization. And can you clarify what that means?
So it means that they used only consonants, and this happened in the first centuries. Actually, like the most Semitical languages. And later on, they also used two different systems of vocalization. And this can also see all that Syriac Christians were divided into two different traditions. The Syriac Orthodox Church, which was geographically and also culturally nearby the Greek tradition. So we are talking about Syria, north of Syria, and about some regions in Iraq, and the Church of the East, or the Syriac or the East Syriac Church, which also had its specific way of vocalization. So they kept different ways of vocalization. The Syriac Orthodox Christians used a system based on Greek vocals, and the sister church, the East Syriac Church, used only dots. For example, dots above and at the bottom. So this was the system of vocalization which was implemented then starting with the end of antiquity.
And so that goes in the body of the text, and then the marginalia are there to indicate where a certain passage will go in the lectionary. The reason this is, I never realized that this was a controversial thing, but there's a book, The History of the Bible in America by Mark Knoll, and he talks about like very large movements throughout American history to have just the plain text of the Bible, and he points out that that's not in line with most of what the history of biblical texts have been. And I think a scholar named Bradley Marsh brought that up to me too. He's a I think mainly a Syriac guy, or maybe a Septuagint guy, but he was telling me about that at SBL in 2023. So that when you brought that up, that was really interesting to me. I do want to shift back to your experience though, because I noticed in my questions I sent you the phrase a brief examination. So you note in the article when you first found this manuscript, you made a brief examination, and I wonder if that is as brief as I picture it being, or if that's something substantially different for an expert academic like yourself.
That's a very good question. And I would say that I started with an overview of the manuscript's content, what text it contains, the manuscript. then followed by an examination of its basic codicological elements. And this serves as an initial mapping of the manuscript, and at first glance, an attempt to date it based on primary observation. So this is the way how to start working with a passage of a manuscript. And this brief study is based on direct interaction with the physical manuscript, which offers a significant advantage over cases where only digital copies are available. So this is the interesting story that and it's very special when you are working with physical manuscripts. Examining a physical manuscript allows for the identification of key features from textual content and material form to aspects of its preservation, even its smell. It's very interesting. And this tangible interaction provides a unique perspective, offering deeper insights and a connection to the historical world in which the manuscript was created. So this, my brief examination started with these aspects, actually, with the content, with the manuscript's content, with the codicological aspects. And I first examined the manuscript's content, which consists of, as I also told, 3 parchment sheets. So I then conducted a careful codicological assessment to test initial hypotheses regarding its dating and potential connections to other manuscripts or Popaine traditions. And this stage must be then followed by further analysis to better understand the context of the manuscript's production and to reconstruct also its literary history and transmission. So I started from the text to the story, to the circulation, to the literary history and transmission. And of course, special attention is given to manuscript descriptions and associated data, including the people and institution involved in its creation, reception, and trade. Because I do not have any information regarding the context of the manuscript, how it arrived at the Romanian Academy, and regarding the sister manuscript in Moscow, we possess only some brief information regarding this donation of the manuscript by Prince Gagarin.
So, a couple of things. Well, I'll ask 2 questions at once. I may forget the second one. I got so excited about this first one. How are the manuscripts protected, like as you're handling them? And then what is the format of, because obviously you're not taking the manuscript out with you, so you're making notes or so. Is there like a standard form that like, I guess industry standard, that may not be the right word, but so how are you taking the pertinent information that you need to go and kind of digest what you just experienced? And I do like the idea of you sniffing an old parchment. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So this, I think, it's your question is in relation with the preservation of manuscripts.
Well, you as an individual interacting with it, is there any protective gloves or something you have to wear?
Yeah. So I think it's we have the chance that we have this manuscript at the Romanian Academy, and from my experience, I also consulted different collections of Syrian manuscripts, and we know that it is very important to preserve these manuscripts, and digitization is also the key, how to preserve the manuscripts for future. The preservation of this manuscript depends, and it is my case also, depends on many factors, because I access the manuscript now. I made it known among the scholars, but I think it's a question regarding how to improve actually the work with the manuscripts, and how to propose actually new ways in which manuscripts actually shouldn't be mishandled. These manuscripts, because this is only one case from a variety of cases, these manuscripts once removed from monasteries and archives, and often passed through multiple hands, because I saw with my eyes that there are the testimonies of these multiple hands in these manuscripts, from these intercolumnar notes, then to vocalization, then to the form of the manuscripts, how the manuscript was mishandled. Were traded on the black market, the manuscripts, and sold at fairs. So, given such circumstances, deterioration was almost inevitable, and we see that the manuscript in Moscow is deteriorated. So the folios now in Bucharest and Moscow were likely purchased individually, possibly at the same time. And we read in Nikolsky's brief description this very short and fragmented history, how the manuscript entered into the collection of the Archaeological Society in Moscow. Regarding its poor condition, because this is also a very important question when we talk about manuscripts and about such an important manuscript like this. Nikolsky's report highlights the fragment's deplorable state. He knows that the prince acquired the leaves in a damaged state. So this was a story of the late 19th century. It could be a story of our time, to see a manuscript in a deplorable state. Then he knows that the prince was very aware about the value of the manuscript, and he gave it to the society. Then the subsequent effort to arrange the folios into a proper sequence resulted in their compilation into a fascicle. So they produced this fascicle, they arranged the folios of the manuscripts. And I think this is also very interesting regarding the manuscripts in Bucharest, because this is the folios are not in a right sequence. And this was my when I started with the evaluation of the manuscript, I saw this, and this was a proof that no one had actually read this manuscript since 100 years or something like that. And the folio came down from in a good sequence. This happened with the manuscript in Moscow, and I also propose this to the Romanian Academy, because this is also in a fascicle, and then they should put this in the right sequence. So what I should say is that the manuscript in Bucharest is better preserved than the sister manuscript in Moscow, and the reason for that, I think, is the fact that the Romanian diplomat Sturza donated the manuscript immediately after his return to Bucharest from Constantinople in 1871, and this coincides with the funding of the Library of the Romanian Academy, when they created the connection of special manuscripts and of rare books. So it's an interesting story, and I think it's important that these manuscripts should be in the near future also digital.
So I know, having spoken to Nick Posgay, who's working on that, I believe, through Cambridge, that seems like that's an overwhelming task, but it's also a very important task to make sure that not only for the preservation of these documents, but also for the ability of the public to gain access to them, because I think this is a real This is an area where I know until I started bothering people to talk about their work, I was almost completely ignorant. Knowing that time is not infinite, and it's much later in the day for you than it is for me, I want to start to kind of wind things down. But is there anything in the article that you were hoping I would ask about that I didn't ask about?
Yeah, this was the first research on this manuscript. Of course, if further folios will somewhere in this world uh, be unveiled, then uh, we should also produce much other questions, much other um, hypotheses regarding the fate of this manuscript and regarding its not only its history and transmission, but also regarding its content. Because this manuscript, it's a value. Actually, it's of great value, and it should be actually preserved. It should be um, um, researched, um, and hopefully, we can connect these both manuscripts, and this can happen through you know. And I think it's worth noting that digitization is important in our work as scholars working with manuscripts, because it facilitates the circulation of knowledge and make, as you said, these manuscripts accessible for scholarly study. Um, but on the other side, as for digitization policies, while it may have led to the dismantling of certain archives, the greater good remains the preservation, I think, of manuscripts in digital collections. Even if, on the one side, digitization involves relocating these materials from their original archives, it helps, on the other side, prevent the gradual disappearance of endangered literary culture. And I think this appeals actually to the Syriac Christian, to the Syriac literature, because these Christians faced numerous threats, including recent attacks by the Islamic State, and then their archives and monasteries then are in danger. So I think there are a lot of things we're discussing regarding these manuscripts, and it can be that probably in the near future scholars will arise further questions and will connect actually this manuscript with previous manuscripts, with much earlier manuscripts, because there are a lot of manuscripts from the 6th century, and I also had the feeling that they belong to the same school of from Turabdin region, from Turkey. And from a codicological perspective, there are also important stuff in these antique manuscripts, to collect them, to connect them with other manuscripts, and to discuss them in the general context.
So where would you direct listeners and me to learn more about Syriac biblical texts, or just ancient manuscripts in general, particularly if you can think of any online sources for digitized text?
Yeah, I think before answering your question, I would like to say some more regarding the interest of the scholars towards these manuscripts at the beginning of the 20th century, and then during the 20th century. And I hope actually that my uh, research and many other evaluations of these manuscripts will answer the questions those scholars from the 20th century hadn't the chance to answer. And I think there is an interesting case with a scholar, John Daniel Thomas, which in his PhD thesis completed in the 1970s, he attempted in vain to consult the folios from the manuscript in Moscow, because at that time some scholars um, um, were aware about the importance of these manuscripts. Some of them considered that it is lost, and he asked the library in Moscow, and then he was informed by the library that the manuscript was vanished. So he hadn't the chance to see the manuscript, even to know of its existence. And then much later, in 2017, David Taylor from Oxford University, uh, knowing the story, knowing the attempt of previous scholars to know the location of this manuscript, he did not include the Moscow manuscript in his list of Herculean manuscripts published in 2017. So the story was at the end. So this was the appearance that scholars consider these manuscripts is lost. But now we have the chance also to debate much more on these manuscripts considered to be lost, and to try to examine the field, and to attempt also to know much more about their hopefully their existence. So I would like to direct your listeners to several online conferences and several materials that are dealing with Syriac materials, with Syriac literary culture, and there is online conference series Urho, which can be translated the way in Syriac, as well as blogs like Digital Orientalists, run by a dedicated team of scholars and librarians. And I believe these platforms share experiences in using also digital tools for humanities, and Syriac manuscripts is also an important category of this blog. In addition, there are expert-focused conferences and workshops on Syriac manuscripts. One notable long-term multidisciplinary project is Middle Eastern Manuscript Traditions at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, led by Sabine Schmidtke and Georgi Kiratz. And finally, I would like to direct your audience to our Syriac journal, the Syriac Annals of the Romanian Academy, established in 2020 by the Romanian Academy, and which is available at saraacad.ro.
Okay, thank you for that. Final question: what do you read for fun?
So, actually, Syriac is very important for me, and what I'm doing, I'm doing with fun. So I'm very passionate of this work with manuscripts, and I think it's a lot of history, it's a lot of philosophy, it's a lot of let's say culture, literary culture, which we need in this world. Actually, we need to further learn and to further talk about literary cultures, and the Syriac one it's a very specific culture.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying your work that much. Is there something else that you do to decompress? Are you a sports fan? Anything like that?
So I'm doing sports. So I am reading a lot. So not only from Middle East literature, from history, but I'm reading a lot of other texts, literature. So I'm 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 also very interested in the media as well, because we should be very selective in our hobbies, and I would say I am doing a lot of things, um, and this keep me fresh in my evaluation of Syriac manuscripts in my work as well.
Okay. Well, unless you have anything else for us, I'm going to call this one good.
So if you wish, we can talk about much more on this manuscript or on my books. I only want to introduce you to my book. So this is my recent book published on the making of Syriac Jerusalem, published with Routledge 2023. The Making of Syriac Jerusalem, Representations of the Holy City in Syriac Literature of Late Antiquity and the Middle Ages. And
nice.
There are some more, but maybe next time.
Yeah, and sorry, you're welcome to come back whenever you want. So I hope there is a next time.
Yes, I look forward to future discussions, and I think this is also a very interesting book, which I just edited, Soul and Body Diseases, Remedies and Healing in Middle Eastern Religious Cultures and Traditions, which was published with Brave. It's a large approach of discussing disease and healing in Middle Eastern traditions, with a lot of texts from confessional cultures, from Greek tradition, from Armenian, Georgian, Arabic culture, Syriac culture as well.
Well, I will definitely try to get my hands on both of those because this has been a fun conversation. Catalin-Stefan Popa, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you for inviting me, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Next week on the podcast, Bruce Gordon will be here to discuss his book, The Bible, A Global History. It was a really fun talk. This was a book that I had a lot of fun. I listened to the audiobook, full disclosure on that one. I really enjoyed this talk. It gives a really good, broad understanding of a history of the Bible around the world. So here's a quick preview of that. Take care, and if you get a chance to love someone, you should take it. Bye. So the question is it fair to say that you are describing, quote, the Bible as a nexus of physical spaces and internal or conceptual spaces? And here's there were several spaces, but here's what I could really find that stuck with me about that. So you say, throughout early Christendom, word and image did not exist apart from the physicality of the books in which they dwelled. With lavish ornamentation and exquisite illuminations, the Bible became a living relic, an object that both transmitted the holy and embodied it. In liturgies of worship, as gifts for kings and emperors, and in monastic prayer, the Bible was not an inanimate object, but a source and creator of sacred spaces in churches, chapels, monasteries, and palaces, as in Coptic Egypt, the land of the Syriac monasteries, and the churches of Ethiopia and Western Europe. In Western Europe, too, Bibles were regarded sacramentally like the body of Christ in the bread and wine. They were precious books to be transcended, illustrated, and displayed as befit their holiness. So if we talk about that the whole time, I'm fine. What more can you say about that for us?
I think obviously there's a lot in that, and you could talk about that for a very long time, but it's the general point is, and there are various aspects of the book which are quite personal in it, although I don't talk about myself, but the directions of it reflect in some ways my upbringing, which was the Bible was primarily the written word, the text. And over the years of teaching and travel and experience and engaging with other communities, whether the icon tradition in Orthodoxy or painted monasteries or the liturgies of the Catholic Church, but also in many ways the liturgies of Pentecostal Church, if you can speak of them. And what over the years has become very clear to me is the physicality of the book, in meaning that it's not just a book that you turn the pages of, that it is itself an embodiment of the message that it contains.